Let's talk a little bit about yourself, who you are, how you got into the business, and a little bit about how long you've been writing, and at what point did your writing begin to take off for you?
I've been doing this professionally since 1997.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, I fell into the business, honestly. I listened to this radio station, 92.3 The Beat, with
Hmm.
John Lennon and the House Party in the mornings. And one day I thought, oh, I could do that. I could write those sketches. So I wrote one and faxed it to them, and
Uh-huh.
they called me and they said, look, we don't take outside writers, but this is funny. We'll pay you freelance.
Right.
And I thought, great, I made it. $50 a sketch. Woohoo. You know, and then I did one so offensive that my mother got mad, and I was really like, I'm on to something here. But a month into it, Keenan Ivory Wayans called the radio station and wanted to know who did that sketch because he was looking for writers for his late night show.
Oh,
So they,
wow.
yeah.
And that
So
was in living color at the time?
no, his Keenan Ivory Wayans show. It was on
Oh,
Fox
right. Okay.
late night show.
Yes.
Yeah. So he called them and they told him, and his executive producer called me in for a meeting. And she said, okay, we need bumpers, we need monologue, we need this and that. I said, okay, wait, what's a bumper?
Right.
I had no Hollywood experience. My dream was to one day retire from Cal State Long Beach and write a book.
Uh-huh.
So she kind of told me. I left there. I got some newspapers and magazines to kind of get material for topical jokes. And, I watched his show, which was premiering that night. And I wrote a bunch of stuff and faxed it back in because, yes, I'm that old. We still faxed. She called me that Saturday and told me to get down there right away. So I was like, okay, fine. I just left the dentist. I need to change. No, come down here. I was like, okay. So I went down there. She put me in a room full of guys, about 14 guys.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't know they were the writers of the show. And they started giving me a hard time, but I gave it back because I hung out with all my cousins who were guys and stuff. So it was no big deal to me.
Right. Yeah.
And then they moved us to this other room with this huge table. And I realized it was a writer's room.
Mhm.
And I realized that after Keenan walked in, and I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. And he saw me and he came over and introduced himself to me. And he was like, hi, I'm Keenan. I was like, I know. And I was tripping out because like he was gorgeous,
Yeah.
a bunch of movie stars and stuff. So I was like, oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Um, so he went and sat down, and the writers, what I thought were like telling stories, like just funny stories, like your uncles kind of do when you sit around at a picnic or something.
Right. Right.
When it was funny, I laughed. When it wasn't, I was just like shrug, like, okay, or whatever. What I didn't realize is they were pitching to him. So
Okay.
when it came around this table to me, I realized he expected me to do that. And I was like, I can't pitch to Mr. in Living Color.
Right.
So I took the sketches that I faxed in. I was like, oh, this one's funny. And I slid it down the table. And you could hear all the guys just sucking that breath like, she's not going to make it. you know, and Keenan, to his credit, he took the sketch and read it. And he said, you're right, this is funny. And he called on the next guy who stood up like he was in a Broadway play. And I thought, oh, that can't be good.
Uh-huh.
And by the end of the meeting, Keenan came over, shook my hand, said, welcome to the team. His
Wow.
line his line producer came and got me and told me how much money I'd be making a week. And the top of my head blew off. I thought he made a mistake. By the end of the meeting, I had a desk and a computer. And I called my mother and told her what happened. I called both my parents, and my mother was on the phone. And she said, Alyson, what does he expect for you to do for that kind of money? I was like, Mama, let's be honest. Ain't too much out. But yeah, and that was it. After that, after the show, he called because he was rewriting Scary Movie, and he wanted me to be a part of that. And then we did
Wow.
Scary Movie 2, and it just kept going from there.
Yeah, so I can imagine that's like a whirlwind of of excitement, and also it's also kind of like a Cinderella story, where you were kind of placed into this world, and you didn't know where it was going to take you. And from there, I'm sure it led you in various different directions until you gotten to this point.
Yeah. Ignorance did me well because I didn't know how hard a late night show would be. So
Hmm.
by the time I did my next gig, I was like, well, nothing is as hard as that. Like we had to turn over material every day. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like trial by fire. And working with Keenan really prepared me for comedy. So
So let's talk about that a little bit, because writing comedy is not an easy task. What are or were some of your inspirations that you drew from to bring the comedic factor necessary to your storylines? Do you have certain inspirations, certain people that you look up to? Where do you draw your humor from in writing? Because it's not easy to write that way.
I feel like I've been a writer my whole life. Like when I was a kid, I told my mother I want to write when I grow up. Like that's the job I want to do. She's like, okay, fine, but learn how to type too. Have a
Right.
back. And I feel my earliest inspirations were my parents, especially my father and his brothers. They were always so funny to me.
Hmm.
They reminded me of Richard Pryor and, you know, the good Bill Cosby we used to
Right.
know. And
The good Bill Cosby.
yeah, things like that. But I was just always drawn to comedy, and it was something I listened to. And um, Keena told me I had a good ear for voices, that I could pick it up that way. And just using my imagination has always led me there,
Mm.
um, and kept me in comedy. Because even in drama, I worked with David E. Kelly a couple times now. And I told him I really loved his work. I fanned out over his work.
Hmm.
And if I ever did drama, it would have to be the way he does it, because I would need some levity to it. I don't want to
Okay.
just stay in a dark place.
Right.
I don't want to just stay breaking hearts.
Right.
So, I'm a sucker for happy endings.
Would you consider yourself a structured writer, or do you just kind of put pen to paper, or just start writing and just let your ideas come to you?
No, I definitely believe in structure. I
Okay.
always I start with notes and ideas and put them down that way. That may develop into a pitch, but then that will eventually become an outline,
Right.
because I need a roadmap. Because in the course of getting from the beginning to the end, sure, you can, um, get off that map and go a different way. Something might take you somewhere else, but I know where I need to get back to.
Hmm.
If the story is going to end this way, I know the road to there. And so I can have little distractions, and a lot of other stuff is born while you're writing.
Right.
But I need that structure of an outline. And I always feel, in my opinion, because I know some writers who like, oh, I don't want an outline, and so you don't want
Right.
to, but you probably should. The best writers do,
Uh-huh.
in some form or another. They at least know the beginning, middle, and end, you know.
Okay.
So that's always helped me.
So you wear so many hats in this show at your age, such as the creator, the writer, the producer, and also the showrunner. If you had to choose, which part do you enjoy most and why? Or was it the writing, the producing aspect, the showrunner? Could you explain that a little bit as far as what you do on the show?
When you're the showrunner, you do all of that. I mean, the
Okay.
creation, of course, came first, and it's great when somebody likes an idea you had enough to shoot it, produce it.
Hmm.
But and they come in different steps. The writing, but show running covers it all. Once they say we're going to do your show, my job starts. And if that's with hiring a staff, talking about production, talking about budgets, interviewing wardrobe, all of that is happening while I'm writing a series.
Okay.
So you can't separate those.
Hmm.
If you are the showrunner, it starts and ends with you. So all the way through to editing, and writing is always there. you know.
Right.
That's part of the reason why we're on strike, because you don't ever, all the way to editing, you're always writing. So I'd have to say, honestly, my favorite part is the whole damn thing.
How do
Yeah.
you feel as far as representation of people of color? I know it's come a long way, but we still have quite a long ways to go within the industry. What is your take on representation within the industry, and where do you see it going? Do you see an improvement, or over the span of your career, have you seen any changes, and whether they're good or bad? And do you think we're headed in the right direction?
I do think we're headed in the right direction. When I started, there were plenty of times where I was not only the only woman in the room, but I was the only Black person in the room, and
Hmm.
plenty of room.
Hmm.
And that started to change. And I started to work with other women, and we were like, oh my God, I've never met you before. I never met you either.
Right.
It was it was great. And then more people of color, and not just being in the room with more Black people, but I think the biggest step is more Black people show running and having their own shows. Because a lot of Black shows were run by white guys, the same
Yes.
guys who were there before.
Right.
And you can always tell the difference. At least we can.
Hmm.
Even if the show is funny, we can sort of tell the difference. Like, oh, y'all don't have any Black people in the room.
Right.
Now, there, not a ton, but there's been quite a few shows, excuse me, that have been successful with Black people at the head. I think we need more than that. And I believe if the show is about us, it should be run by us. That doesn't preclude me from having a show with a bunch of white people in it.
Right.
But we need to be given those opportunities to fail like
Just as
everyone else.
much. Yes, just as
Just
much.
as much.
Yes.
Because they didn't make Shonda Rhimes show a Black hospital,
Right.
and that's a step up for us.
Right.
That kind of thing, knowing that we have a voice, original voices and stories, is important. So, and I think that's for every person of color,
Hmm.
because it makes the stories richer. It makes what you're able to watch a lot richer. And I know that it's improved, although it can get better, just in the difference from I was on the picket line in 2007 and 2008, and this time around. The diversity is so good and so
Oh,
rich. And that's something we need to continue.
do you think at the end of the day that, it will end in a positive, and it'll work for the writers? I would hope so, but it looks like a lot of these studios are holding out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't predict it. I can only hope, but I believe there will be some gains made for the writers.
Mm.
There always have been, even when we got to this point. We'll have certain gains. Now, will we get everything we want? No.
Right.
But I believe, every 3 years we go through this.
Hmm.
And every time somebody at some point has to compromise, including the studios.
Right.
I believe we improve for the next generation. I'd love to be Pollyanna and say, oh yeah, we'll get everything we want. It'll be great. That
Right.
won't happen.
Yeah.
We'll make some improvements step by step.
Mhm.
We'll hope not to be placed with robots. We'll try to
Right.
fight against now, so that's not a fight somebody has to do later.
Yes.
And I think we'll score on the big things. We have to.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I don't think AI is the way to go here. I think you genuinely have to have personality within the writing. The creativity and the art form of it all should never go away, just for the bottom dollar.
AI has never had its heart broken. It's
Right,
never been worried about paying the light bill.
right.
It's never experienced sheer joy at having a child being born. Like those things you can't imitate.
No, not
And
at
there's
all.
so many different things within that, the minutia of it, the things you discover in a writer's room from other writers' experiences.
As far as writers' rooms are concerned, I've never been in a writer's room, but I've also heard about mini rooms. Or I guess there are smaller rooms where there's maybe like a handful of people. Have you been in a mini room, and what's the difference between being in I guess, a large writer's room and a mini room? Because from what I read and what I take online, they have like really quick turnarounds, and things don't always go their way. Sometimes once all the writing is done, the project may never even see the light of day. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's the biggest part of mini rooms, because I've heard about several, and some of them have, 8 to 10 writers, but the time period is so short.
Right.
And there's no way you can complete a project. I don't care if it's 10 episodes. It always tell producers, do you want it fast or do you want it good?
Right. Right.
Because there's a difference. And this whole writing process is layering. So I have been in one. Matter of fact, the one I was in, I didn't even know it was a mini room. I wasn't aware of mini rooms until I was in one.
Mm-hmm.
And they catch people, they pay you minimums, but they tend to catch people, I noticed, when they weren't working or they were between jobs, because the more of these streaming shows that started to happen, people were unemployed at different times.
Right.
But it always leaves a showrunner in the end, especially if the show gets picked up, writing or finishing those scripts on their own. Our writers like, no, I'll finish my draft, and they're writing without being paid.
Mm-hmm.
So it shortchanges us. We're making less money and spending more time. And what we're asking for is guaranteed weeks. So it doesn't it makes the job worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And guaranteed minimums on staffing, so that everybody doesn't have to work themselves to death. If you
Gotcha.
have 12 episodes, you have to have so many writers.
Okay.
But it's the worst part about it, though, is, well, two things I feel, is to go through that process and then the show not even get picked up.
Exactly.
That's a lot of heart and soul you put into nothing.
Yeah.
And then two, the one I was in, the show hadn't been picked up. And I kind of felt like, so they hired us to help him break his story.
Mm.
They help. I'm like, that's something you usually do at home by yourself.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'm getting paid, whatever. But then often the work that mini room has done doesn't get seen on a show that gets picked up. It gets picked up, or by the time it gets picked up, everybody's off doing something else, and they hire a whole new staff who then gets credit for writing the show when it's been totally developed and broken by the room before. So it's a lot of sticky situations to it.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's I don't know how I would feel being placed in that type of scenario, but I've heard many of stories that sound pretty crazy like that. And I didn't know that happened within this industry. I figured, once your show got picked up and you began writing, they may try to green light it and air it, but that's how some shows end up with one season, and then they don't move forward after that. Part of the reason why I wanted to kind of give some of this insight is because I want to kind of bring a little bit of that to light for the audience and the people who will either read the story, watch the interview, so on and so forth, because I feel that it's important to know, and to also know where we're at and where it could potentially go, and hopefully nobody gets placed in those situations moving forward. Let's talk a little bit about Act Your Age. How was the process of working with Tisha Campbell, Yvette Nicole Brown, and Kym Whitley? How was that?
Wonderful. Really
I can imagine.
wonderful. I can't And I did note that you're in the area where the show is set, the DMV.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Being that you said it in the DMV, have you been to this area? What drew you to this region to want to pinpoint that?
I've only been there once, quite honestly. I've been to DC.
Okay.
Um, but it was the network. They wanted a show in this area.
Oh,
And I
okay.
kind of love that because I haven't seen too many lately there, but I thought it was great. But
Hmm.
these three women have been on my bucket list forever. And I've known them through different experiences. I've always thought they were funny.
Hmm.
When I tell you the appreciation I showed for them, they gave it right back. So working with them was literally brilliant. It's the best experience with talent that I've had.
Really? That's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
we're excited to do it. Look, there are three women who have always been the girlfriend, the assistant, the wife, and in Kym's case, the whore. You know,
Right.
stories have never been about them.
Right.
These stories are about and for them. So they were appreciative of that. And,
Mhm.
love was given, love was received. It was fantastic.
To that point, there's never really been a show about three black women at in their 50s. There's no show that's been this way. It's either a family oriented show. We've had like Girlfriends and Living Single, but nothing of this dynamic. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's a pretty good take and a good angle to go at. And I'm glad that you were able to actually bring that to life because we need more stories like that. And definitely women in their 50s definitely need representation on TV as well. So
That's
I
right.
yeah, I definitely applaud that, and I'm glad that you were able to create a show that has those aspects to it.
Yeah. I'm so happy to be the one to do it because it was long overdue.
How did Bounce TV approach you? You already kind of have a spec script or a pilot ready to go. How does that work?
I honestly, this doesn't happen too often. And I did not have a pitch ready to go. I'd
Hmm.
had some similar spec scripts that I've written before in this area. But producer Brad Gardner, who was with MGM, I met with him first. And he said he liked my work and Bounce had this show. And if I was interested, they'd give me 16 episodes. And I'm like, yeah, right.
Wow.
So then he set up a meeting with I said, yeah, of course I'm interested. He set up a meeting with Bounce and Scripps Network, who owns Bounce, and
Okay.
um David Hudson and JJ. I always want to say JJ Abrams. It's not JJ Abrams, but I met with them and they literally told me those are my requirements. These women, friends, 50s,
Uh-huh.
DMV area, had money. So I said, okay, I can do that.
Right.
And I went away and wrote a pitch and came back like a week later and pitched it to them. They loved it and said to go forth. And next thing I knew, I
Wow.
had a show.
I was going to ask, like, what is the timeline of your writing process when you're writing, uh, an episode? How long does that take you?
Well, it varies because we start writing before the show airs. But usually a writer gets a week to go off and write a script that we've basically broken in the room.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll write their outline. Sometimes we'll just do the outline in the room. And then they get a week to go off and write the script. When that
Okay.
comes back, we go over pitch stuff for the episode. And then depending on how close we are to production, we have to get ready for a table read.
Hmm.
And we do the table read, take notes on that, and then polish it up to go in production like the following week. It depends on when that table read was. It might be a week away, it might be 3 days away. We have to get it ready to be shot. So, that's why a lot of rooms start in June for like the fall season, so
Okay.
they can be scripts ahead of time.
I see.
But even when you do that, there's a certain amount of writing that has to go on while you're in production.
Hmm.
So that's why I say, as a showrunner, you never take off that hat.
I see. And as far as releasing new episodes now, from the first set of episodes, was that giving time for the writers to have more episodes done, or was that done on
Uh,
purpose to kind of stretch out the span of the season?
that was done to stretch out the season. We
Okay.
had written and shot all 16 episodes before you even saw the first
Oh wow.
one.
Okay.
And then we had a little spring break.
Got
And
it.
then they came, so we can have some over the summer. So two
Okay.
aired on Saturday, the first two, and
Yes.
they'll continue to air for the rest of the summer.
So when you're uh, in the process of filming the show, do you actually do any of the directing as well?
Yeah, I haven't officially directed any episodes, and I've been lucky, our first season to have great directors. So I haven't had to, or had the desire to, because they have a job,
Yeah.
on their own. But I work closely with all of them,
Hmm.
and it's such a collaborative effort and a sharing of ideas that I love when I, work with somebody who, for one, you know, understands that, and how do I say this? In TV, the showrunner's in charge. In
Hmm.
movies, the director's in charge.
Okay, I see.
So, yeah, it's great when you get a director who understands that and who loves the collaboration. I sit down with all my directors before we start and just have a, you got any questions kind of meeting, you
Hmm.
know, and especially for a first season, just establishing the tone of the show was important to me. So again, I had a bunch of great directors who were open to that. And yeah, if they've rehearsed something, um, and I either want it different,
Hmm.
or while I'm sitting there see something else, I always try to go through the director first,
Uh-huh.
and see if they can translate it. If for some
Right.
reason it still doesn't come across the way I like it, time is money. So I'll go straight to the actor and say, try this, or
Hmm.
let's change this line to that. So yeah, I'm always very involved because I have directed, just not for this show.
Hmm.
But I don't take away anything because this is multicam. I've never directed multicam. To
Right.
me, it looks like juggling,
Yeah.
and I'm not good at that. But I do love somebody that I can collaborate with.
So speaking of multicam, from a director's standpoint, I know there's you have film crew, but the director is standing behind a panel, and he's actually looking at all three cameras, and is he giving the direction as to how that how it switches, or that all comes in the editing process?
No, that's the AD who
Okay.
does that. And the director is usually in the village with the rest of us. They call it the village,
Okay.
and there's a monitor there with all the cameras, with the four angles of the four cameras. So the director and the DP keep an eye on that. AD. I always get that mixed up.
AD.
ADDP.
Okay.
AD.
Assistant director, is that what it stands
Yes,
that stands for? Okay.
yes.
Yes.
And they keep an eye on that. And we had a great AD that was with us all year. Michael, he was fantastic. I'm bad with the last names,
It's
but
okay.
he was fantastic. So that's a relationship that's great too, is because he can spot some stuff. He's keeping an eye on stuff that me or the director might not have seen, and
Mhm.
can make suggestions for shots. We had a tricky episode that hasn't aired yet, where it was a game night. So it was a lot of players, a lot of little card tables and everything.
Right.
And I wanted a certain setup, but the director kind of thought that would be too hard to do. So we just put our heads together and figured it out. And our AD was a big part of that,
Mm.
figuring out how we could shoot that, which would help us make our day.
Right.
So, and the director got on board and we made everything work. And it's just important to have that I like a set with no egos.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Yes.
I take mine at the door. I want everybody else to do the same. And
Right.
I want us to work together in that process.
Right.
In this business, I've had to run up against egos.
Yeah.
I've had to check my own. I stop myself before I curse somebody out. So with Act Your Age, though, we were, I don't know who heard me in heaven, but we had an egoless set and everybody wanted to make this work.
Good.
So
Yeah.
that really helped.
Yeah, I mean, because and not only that, just the way the show's put together, the chemistry, everything seems to flow well. It doesn't seem like, it's going to take some time to develop or anything like that. So I thought that was pretty impressive, and I enjoyed the show. I think it's pretty funny. I love Tisha Campbell. I love all three of them really, but Tisha Campbell is one of my favorites. And Kym Whitley, of course, from Friday, is definitely hilarious. But I really like the dynamic that you brought to the table with this, and we need more shows like this, I think.
I agree. And
yeah.
Thank you. I can't take full credit for the dynamic. These women have been friends for 30 years, so I kind of cheated.
Oh, wow.
I knew that they knew each other and supported each other. So it was great off the bat that we had that chemistry, and they've been wanting to work with each other like this.
Do you have any upcoming projects outside of Act Your Age that you are developing? I know right now nobody is submitting anything due to the writer's strike, but I'm sure you probably have a few tricks up your sleeve as far as upcoming shows or upcoming ideas that you might have. Do you have anything in the works outside of Act Your Age?
I have an idea that's been nagging at me for years. And I woke up a few days ago and it was like, oh, you're going to write this. You're like, it wouldn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, like I said, my note process, which I'll turn into an outline. And, Act Your Age is my main priority right now, but I always, especially when we have downtime, like to write spec material.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe I could spin off shows or be the Norman Lear bounce. But this idea.
You never know. You never know.
This idea. You never know. Like I said, it's been in my head for years. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It was kind of exhausting at first, picketing all day and then coming home to write.
Right.
And I'm just getting my groove back as far as creativity and things like that. So yeah, by the time this is over, I'll have something else, to present.
Is like sitcoms, are they like your bread and butter? Or are you open to doing other projects like TV series or film?
Comedy is my bread and butter.
Okay.
I've done from radio to sketch to movies. I've done comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done 1 hour show, which it was an hour, but not necessarily so dramatic, but big shot for Disney Plus.
Okay.
And that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's that hour script. I was like, oh, I'm still writing.
Yes.
So I would really have to have a story that I need to tell to do that hour again. I always do comedy, whether it's sitcom or single cam or like, I said movies and stuff, because that feels like a one-off.
Right.
But a 1 hour series, I would really have to be compelled.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you prefer to do all of the writing yourself, or do you get it to a certain point and then you bring on a team of writers to help? Or is this something that you pride yourself in writing each episode?
No, I'm a little OCD with my writing. Like I'm a little protective. So in the beginning, like for the pilot and stuff, I don't share it, except for the people I have to who are going to give me notes. I have one or two friends. When I'm done, I may let them read it, just to get an opinion. I let my daughter read a lot of stuff. But then like something we're taking a series like we did Act Your Age, I definitely have to have a staff,
Right. Right.
for not only ideas, but to handle some of those drafts.
Right.
Now, since it was a first season show, and I think this will always be me because, like I said, I'm OCD with it. I make a last pass on every draft. Even if we
Okay.
table it and take it to the room, I still have to be alone with it and make a last pass. Writers understand that, though. I don't put my name on a script just because I helped to write it or did that last pass. It's still their script.
Right.
Usually a story or a story I assign because I think they would be great for this episode. So yeah, I because they bring you ideas that maybe you wouldn't have thought of it in this way. And I don't feel like I'm a creative genius where I'm going to think of everything. So I just polish it at the end because I know the show has to have a certain voice and tone. And that's another job of the showrunner.
If you were to give advice to young and up and coming and aspiring screenwriters, even filmmakers and actors, what advice would you give them if they're green? And then also, what advice would you give those that are, kind of already have a foot into the industry, but they're still trying to find their way? And in particular, can you also point out, what it takes, especially being a person of color, and some of the difficulties that we might have to go through to be seen and heard and represented properly?
I think starting with writers, that you never stop writing. You always have something ready. And Hollywood is looking for your voice. So don't write what you've seen. Those are good guides. The difference between now and when I was coming up is you can get a script off of the internet, just to use for research, just to see format and see how a story flows.
Right.
But continue to write. And then the second hardest part of that is sharing your work. But what I think is great now, I see these writers groups, which I encourage you to join. They table each other's scripts. So you get to hear it out loud, which helps a lot, and as a person of color, as a Black person, you can't give up. Because trust me, this is an ebb and flow business. It'll be darker before the dawn. But the reason I'm still here is because I never quit. I made a way to write some point, and eventually you put enough history behind you that people call.
Right.
As far as actors and filmmakers, all the technology is there. Even without a GoFundMe, you got a phone in your hand. And I know you've heard this before, but it is true. You don't have to make the big epic film, but it's the small ones that resonate with people, the ones that relate to other people. If it's a film about you babysitting your nephew, story is king for each and every one of these people you mentioned, writers, directors, actors. Story is king. Know how to tell a story.
Right.
Do your research on that. And I hated homework in school. My job is homework.
Yes.
Not a 9-to-5 gig. I'm always doing something in my head or taking notes about something. It is my life. We used to joke about people who said, I want to be a writer. We used to go, no, either you are a writer or you aren't. It doesn't even sound like a joke now. It kind of sounds mean, but it's the truth. If I wasn't doing this show, I'd still be writing. I'd still be creating stories.
Right.
So you really have to want it. You really have to want it. And I think our life is hard. I think about actors who go to auditions and so much rejection.
Yeah.
I let that shit roll off your back.
Right.
Because it's coming for everybody.
Hmm.
You have to believe in yourself and your voice and be willing to learn. I don't know everything yet. I don't want to know everything yet.
Right.
Every time I learn something good, I use it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Like you need a bag of tricks.
Right. And it keeps things interesting. It keeps things exciting. It keeps you going.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, Alyson, I truly, truly appreciate your time. Congratulations again on your new show. And thank you for giving us insight on what it takes to be a screenwriter, a showrunner, a creator, an amazing person like yourself. Thank you
Thank
so
you. Two
much.
things.
Yes.
Two things I want to say before we go.
Sure.
Watch Act Your Age on Bounce Saturdays at 8 o'clock. I
Yes.
always forget to do that. And two, pay for Zoom. Pay for Zoom. It won't cut you off.
Right.
You can talk all day long.
Right. 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 I apologize for that. And one last thing for yourself. Where can people find you? Can you plug your social media for us?
Oh, sure. It's my name on everything. AlysonFouse or at AlysonFouse on Instagram and Twitter. AlysonFouse.
Yes. And you're also on TikTok as well, I believe. I followed, at least I followed
Oh,
somebody.
yeah.
I think that's you.
Yeah, that is me. I only post stuff for the show. Oops.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's my name on that too. Like my
Yes, it
name and
is.
numbers. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for your time. I hope you have a great evening.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a great night. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye bye.